In this video, I want to explain how to use the course book in particular and the learning diagrams in the course book to think creatively about your own assessments. One of the things that might be concerning you is that the book takes a very particular approach to the relationship between young people and media influence. And you might be thinking, well, what can I do with that? This is what Andy's interested in, but what about what I'm interested in? So, with regards to that, what I want to reassure you about is that the thing that you should be thinking about when you're reading the unit book and thinking about what it's got to do with your assessment is how the learning process can be applied creatively to examples of media culture in action that you are interested in. So if we look at the book, you'll see that it has been modeled according to a very particular process of inquiry, which is mapped out in the learning diagrams at the beginning of each chapter. And most of the seminars are based on this issue. So in the book, I explore the general issue of if violent media content can create real violence and all of the academic problems that come with that question. It's a very limited way to think about how media influence society. And I'm going to be explaining why that's so in the seminar, but also to an extent in this video. But the important thing to focus in on is that I'm starting off with a question that I can relate to a much larger question that applies to a far broader field. That is, so the question of can rap make violent people is related to the question of are the most important sorts of media effects the ones we can see, the ones where exposure to a particular kind of message is leading to a particular kind of behaviour. And I'm going to be arguing that no, it isn't, that that's actually a way of thinking about media influence that really underestimates things and really underestimates the range of reasons why certain sorts of media content can be interesting and worth researching. And that's, if you understand that, that's really the key to understanding how to use these diagrams that may be about issues that you're not especially interested in terms of the case studies, to do something that you are interested in. Then, of course, the other big challenge in using this book is updating the theory, because one of the things we're going to be seeing is that many of the case studies that I talk about in the book really need to be rethought in light of things that have happened since this book was published. But that's okay, because that's how learning happens. And the important thing to note is that this, in a way, is trying to chart what you're going to be doing through the semester. You're going to be generating a set of ideas, and then you're going to be developing, rethinking them. So one of the things that I'm going to be doing in the seminars are taking the chapters from this book and thinking about, well, in a very explicit way, how can we apply these lessons and these themes to a completely different set of case studies and different examples. And I want to talk about how we can do that in relation to the assessments. And the other thing that I want to do here is to show that when you begin to think about the assessments and some of the lessons that we're teaching here in this unit, what you begin to see is there's a really interesting crossover between some of the assessments. So I think what we can do is see how in this particular video, what I'm going to talk about is how some of the things that emerge from this chapter on RAP, on understanding media effects research through RAP, can actually lead to asking different kinds of questions in other fields such as celebrity and the significance of media users, as well as raising different ways of thinking about what makes media content offensive or dangerous, and included in here the question of how we can actually see media violence as a tremendously positive thing. So what I want to be suggesting here is that we're going to be thinking creatively about these research outcomes, and we're going to be thinking, and one of the things that you need to be doing is digging into these chapters as a first point of call and thinking, well, how can I take this material in a different kind of direction? And two of the lessons that emerge from this particular seminar, as you'll see in the other part of the seminar, are that firstly, media violence might be a positive, creative thing in the world, that one of the problems with research into violent media is that it underestimates the complexity of what that violent media may be about, and the other is that violent media may be good. Now, intimately tied to this, one of the reasons why I use rap is the fact that one of the reasons why rap is so closely associated with the question of media violence is because many people underestimate its complexity as a cultural form, particularly around questions of authenticity. And that creates a way of branching out into thinking about how rap relates to some of the issues that we're going to be talking about in here relate to the question of authenticity. So let's take two different approaches. Firstly, one of the things that comes out of this, one of the lessons for understanding media influence, is that when we look at all of the research on media effects, what we see is that the question of whether violent media causes violent behavior vastly underestimates the range of the dynamic and the multifaceted nature of media influence. If you only look for the behavioral effects of media, there's so much that you miss. And part of that relates to two things. Firstly, the question that media violence is good for some people. And secondly, there's the question that when we talk about soldiers here, what we're really talking about is the way that media users become involved, quite often in some very conscious ways, in producing media outcomes. Let me apply this to the world of gaming. A couple of years ago, a very interesting game came out called Valiant Hearts, which was a very kind of creative role-playing game based around the Great War. And there was a great deal of violence in it, but the fascinating thing about this game was that the user, the player, actually spent a lot of their time trying to avoid violence. So what we see here is, this question of is media violence always bad? What we have here is a particular game that was widely championed within the gaming community for portraying and drawing conscious attention to the atrocities that violence causes, to the social damage that violence causes. And so the violence in this particular game was designed to produce a sense of empathy amongst its players. So this is an example of a so-called violent piece of media content, a game about the First World War, that actually does something different with the violence. And this invites us to think about why people engage with violence and the reasons why there can be some positive social aspects to media violence. To illustrate what I mean, I'm just going to show you this clip. And this is a YouTube a YouTube video that shows online gamers reacting to the end of Valiant Hearts. As I say, Valiant Hearts is a role-playing game that's based on four characters who live through the Great War, and there's a very involved story here about people trying to get back to their loved ones and all that kind of thing, and it ends really tragically. If you want to play this game, you might not want to watch this end here. But I think if we watch, this is a video of the end of Valiant Hearts. This is the scene that you get to see when you've completed the gameplay. And on the screens around you, you'll see the reactions of people who play this game to the final scene.
This letter is my last. I've been found guilty by a military court for the death of an officer. It was not my intention to kill him. War makes men mad. Though I failed Carl, I know my sacrifice has not been in vain. I fought for my country and my liberty. My honor is assured. Since it is the will of God to separate us on earth, I hope we'll meet again in heaven. Keep me in your prayers. Your loving Baba. Always.
Even though their bodies have long since returned to dust, their sacrifice still lives on. We must strive to cherish their memory and never forget.
So we can see from this that it would be pretty silly to ask if any of these people that you see on the screen in front of you are about to go off and hurt somebody. It's more sort of, if you were worried for anybody, you'd be worried for them, wouldn't you? They all look like they need a nice hug and a cup of tea or something like that. And what this, of course, tells us is the way that it's kind of similar in a way to the argument that's made by Pieslak, that soldiers expose themselves to music that they perceive as violent because they need to hype themselves up into an agitated state. But that reflects a broader, perhaps more important aspect of media culture, which is young people, and in fact all of us, engage with media a lot of the time because we want to have an emotional experience. And when you understand that, then you understand the way that some forms of media violence actually aren't about making people cruel or passive or afraid or violent, but it's actually making them empathetic. So if we go back to the unit plan, what you'll see is one of the implications of the argument I'm making here. The most important stuff is understanding why you can't think of effects in straightforward ways. But another part of this could carry the violence question over into the question on media users. The way that the impact of media content is shaped by the desire amongst users to have some kind of emotional experience. Now that might be good or it might be bad, but what it does do is place the onus on understanding the relationship between media outcomes and the nature of the user experience to the medium. And the interesting thing is that there's actually nothing in that argument that counters what people like Albert Bandura say, who you will have been introduced in the lecture. So that's one way of cutting the content here in a slightly different direction that leans more toward using the media user question. Here's another one, a little bit more lighthearted, perhaps. I don't know if any of you recognize this person. I don't know if any of you are fans of the UK X Factor, but let me introduce you to Honey G.
H to the O to the N to the E to the Y to the G, it's Honey G. H to the O to the N to the E to the Y to the G, it's Honey G. When I say honey, you say G. Honey G. Honey G. When I say honey, you say G. Honey G. Honey G. Check it to wreck it, let's begin. Party on, party people, let me hear some noise. Honey G's in the house, let me hear some noise. Let me hear some noise. This is a Missy Elliott one-time exclusive. Is it worth it? Let me work it. I put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. It's nerve, it's nerve, if you got a big, let me search it. Find out how much you wanna work it. It's nerve, it's nerve, see my hips and my tips go cha. See my ass and my lips go cha. I lost a few pounds off my waist for ya. Let the color beat and go rat-ta-ta. Rat-ta-ta-ta, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. Work it, I need a glass of water. Boy, oh boy, it's good as ever. If you work it, let me work it. I put my thing down, flip it and reverse it. It's nerve, it's nerve, if you got a big, let me search it. Work it, it's nerve, it's nerve, if you're a fly gal, get your nails done, get a pedicure, get your hair did.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Sharon,
Yes, darling.
I never knew you were into this urban stuff.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm down.
I'm down. So what would you say, guys?
Well, I don't quite know what to say.
I do.
What does your mum think about this?
Some of my tracks have got swearing on them. My mum doesn't like that, but apart from that, she's down with me.
Make it stop.
You look like you're having a nervous breakdown over there.
I was so uncomfortable. That shouldn't happen. You shouldn't be doing that.
Come on, guys, you got to feel me.
Did you say we have to feel you?
Yeah, you got
I
to
don't
feel
want
me
to feel
because-
you. I felt you and I don't want to feel you again.
Well, one would have thought that that would have been the end of Honey G, but no. In fact, she has progressed through the competition to the point where she was involved in stage extravaganzas like this.
Do you want to know about Samara Morgan? She saw things.
The obligatory commercial, of course, which tells us a lot about media industries.
But she survived. When you watch that video, you set her free.
Honey G's about to shut it down. You're VIP. Let's kick it. Ice, ice, baby. Ice, ice, baby. Alright, stop. Collaborate and listen.
Okay, so why do I find this so interesting? Well, much of the debate that there has been around Honey G hasn't so much been around her vocal rap abilities or lack thereof, as it's been around her authenticity. The question of whether what she's doing is an act, whether she is genuinely a fan and an aficionado of rap culture, or whether she's somehow simply appropriating the elements of rap culture and kind of putting them together in an inauthentic, semi-insulting way that is simply an inauthentic performance. So when Simon says, that's just wrong, you shouldn't be doing that, it's really a question about her authenticity. And the fascinating thing about the Ice Ice Baby performance is it's this kind of inauthenticity redux, because if you went back to, it's obviously a performance of Vanilla Ice's Ice Ice Baby, which of course created huge amounts of controversy back in the late 1990s and 1980s for two reasons. Firstly, the unashamed sampling of the hook from Under Pressure by Queen and David Bowie. But secondly, the question of Vanilla Ice's authenticity himself as a white performer. Is that an authentic thing to do? But of course, if we go back to some of the stuff that we've read in the rap case study, what we see is the really interesting way that authenticity is tied to a very particular view of the rap industry, one that underestimates the level of performativity in rap. So there's a couple of things I would say about Honey G, and this is not to say that I think she's good or that I liked her performance or anything like that. As a media scholar, those questions are relevant. There's no point in asking, is she a good rapper? Is she not? But it is kind of interesting that the way that she was treated on that show seems to be based on a couple of assumptions about the nature of authenticity that seem very particular to rap. So one of the things that we've seen in the seminar is the way that public perceptions of rap always assume that there's a very close connection between the rapper's performance and what the rapper is like off stage. And one of the things that we've seen from rap performers like Eminem and Insane Clown Posse is the argument that we are acting out a particular type of persona. We are playing characters who are telling stories. And just as no one accuses Stephen King of causing murder, people shouldn't be accusing us of encouraging violence, because what we are doing is we are telling stories in character. Now, it rather seems to me that some of the controversy around Honey G is kind of caught up in this. It isn't just that she's rubbish and obviously shouldn't be doing this. It's also based in a range of assumptions about the nature of rap performance. So one of the early criticisms that were made of her was, okay, you've come on and you've done one rap and that was quite funny, but what are you going to do next? What are you going to do that's original? Now, no one ever asks that about singers on the X Factor, who are all singing someone else's song. So why would it be so impossible to imagine that any performer could perform as a rapper doing other people's raps? That's what the X Factor does. The second thing is that it seems that there seems to be a certain assumption that, this is somehow inauthentic, because actually what you have is a middle-class white woman who runs a recruitment company playing this part, and there's something wrong with that. Well, again, that kind of playing devil's advocate underestimates the performativity that is championed in all forms of rap. The idea that rappers are performing. It is a performance. It is doing something which does not reflect the backstage you. So Honey G, in that sense, is a very interesting example of how issues of performativity relating to rap can be connected with the authenticity of celebrity that emerges from reality television. So if you were going to do an article about Honey G, it would be perfectly feasible to argue that Honey G made such a splash because she came to embody the intersection of a number of themes. The nature of celebrity that emerges from reality television meets confusion about the performativity of rap culture. I'm not saying she's real. I'm not saying she's fake. I'm saying that the question is an interesting one that could be pursued from a number of different directions. So the lesson there is to think creatively about what you're doing in this unit. We've started off with a lecture about violence and rap, but we've understood that the question of violence and rap is a gateway to a series of other questions about media culture regarding the nature of media effects, the nature of performance, the nature of authenticity, and the role of media users in making the social impact of social media. So what I want you to do is follow suit. When you're reading the unit guide, don't just try and swallow it whole. Pick out the bits that interest you, that you can take in a different direction. And that's how to use some of the seminar material creatively to develop your own assessments.